Hey guys, welcome back to Home Theater Gurus. So today we're going to be talking about kind of a hot topic, sealed subs or ported subs. So if you're looking at buying one, which one should you buy? So we're going to talk about the differences between two, and I think it's really going to surprise a lot of you because it's going to be different than probably what most of you have heard. Now I want to touch on one thing real quick, and that's group delay. We're not going to talk on it very much, but group delay is how long it takes for a driver to receive an input and then output sound, basically is what it is. Now, unless you are an audiophile and you know all the stuff we're fixing to go over, you know how to set your subs up to perfection. Maybe you've even gotten into bass trapping and things like that, which there's nothing wrong with that. I do that in some of my designs, or most of my designs. But if that's you and you're at a level where group delay is something that you want to worry about, fine, nothing wrong with that. But for us, it's not going to make a difference. Those are not the things that are making our speakers or one type of alignment sound muddy or slow. Another thing that we need to note is we're not talking about, or in this video, we're not talking about the sealed subs from like JTR or GSG Audio, where they have the 21-inch sealed options and the new 24-inch sealed with a 24-inch driver from Stereo Integrity that is just freaking insane. You know, we're not talking about those top dogs where they're not going to have the issues we're talking about. We're talking about anything from you guys trying to decide between a PB16 or the SB16 or the other sealed and ported alignments from SVS, Polk, Klipsch, you know, where you can decide which one. You have two different choices, which one should you choose. So we're going to look at how similar drivers or the same driver behaves in both and how that's going to behave in room and what makes one sound slow or fast. All right, decay. So decay is something that's happening in our room, and it's how long it takes for, well, as far as we're concerned, or what we need to know is how long it takes for it to no longer be audible. If you go in a room and clap your hands, you're listening to the decay. How long does it ring? So from like 200 or 300 hertz, we may want it to be 350 milliseconds, 400 milliseconds. We get below 200 milliseconds, we have too much absorption. Maybe it's a little dry sounding, not enough energy. But that's just how long it takes any specific frequency to hang around in the room and how long is it audible. Now with subwoofers, we have an issue because the waves are so big, they can't physically fit in the room. So I like to think of it like ocean waves. Like the room is an aquarium and you've got waves in there and they're being excited because you're cranking up the volume, and so it's got peaks and valleys and they're all slamming into each other, and sometimes when they slam, they make a peak. Some places they make a valley in the room. When I design rooms, do a modal analysis on the room, so I place the seats and the subs to fix some of those issues and to miss some other ones. But there's a lot going on in the subwoofer frequency. It's called the modal region. All right, so to explain decay really quick, we're gonna use the ocean as an analogy again. All right, so let's say this is the ocean. This is the level of the water in the ocean. Everything above here, we can see, right? Or we're gonna say we can hear. Everything below here, we can't see, we can't hear. So let's say this is an iceberg right here. Okay, it goes way under the water. And it's coming up above the water a good bit. Let's say this is our frequency response right here. We got this big, huge peak right here. Now let's say this distance right here is 200 milliseconds. It's audible, but its decay is 200 or 300 milliseconds or whatever. It sounds good. But when we get right here where this peak is, not only is it way too loud because it's a peak, we also have a long decay time because there's so much that's audible. The decay time, or the decay rate of decay doesn't change. It just, because it's up so high, more of it is in the audible range. So this is what's happening in your room. Now this may be 30 hertz, usually around 30 hertz and below, we have a lot of this. There's a lot of peaks going on, and everywhere there's peaks, there's a longer decay time. Now this does not mean that this subwoofer is muddy, doesn't mean this subwoofer is slow. It means that this peak right there that is interacting with the room, or is happening because of the room, it's making it sound slow. It's making it sound muddy, not tight, not fast. Now your room EQ system should normally squash this, but a lot of times the EQ systems have you measuring in front of you and behind you way too far, so you're actually measuring dips and nulls that aren't at your listening position where you're sitting. So they may not actually fix these issues. They could do more harm than good. I don't like the way that they have you set up. So a lot of guys will do this manually, and they'll make sure their response looks good at their seat before they give it to room correction. And then they'll pay attention to how they move the mic. They won't place the mic where they know there's a modal issue. You know, you don't want to place it where there's a huge peak that doesn't exist at the seat, because if you do that sampling where you measured that peak, it may EQ a dip at your listening position, which you don't want that. Or it may not effectively squash a big peak like this, so it may still sound muddy even after you run your room correction. But if we squash it, we bring it back down with the rest of it, and then we also push what's audible, all that decay and that ringing is pushed down as well. It's pushed further down under the water. So it's still there. 30 hertz is going to ring at a specific rate. There's nothing we can do to change that, but we can push it down below the audible level, and we get rid of that big peak that we don't want because it's too loud. Hopefully you guys can understand that. So let's move on to the differences in a sealed versus ported. All right guys, so this picture right here is actually from the WinISD tutorial. WinISD is a program you can use to design subwoofers. And in this program, this is, I did this about 2 years ago, but this was a UM18 made by Dayton Audio. It's a very, very popular 18-inch driver. It's very, very good for the money. It's used by some name brand companies that have it. You can go online and purchase subwoofers, and they have this driver in them. Also, the very famous or very popular full Marty, the Marty subs. This is one of the drivers that was originally intended for those subs. In this example, we're looking at the exact same driver, used in an 8 cubic foot box. And then you have a full Marty, which is what we're comparing it to. Same driver, just in one box, built more for performance. The other, can't really say the sealed alignment's not for performance, it just behaves much differently. And that's what we're gonna look at. And this is gonna directly help you guys trying to decide which option to get when you're looking at SVS, Polk, or whatever it may be, and there's different alignments with a similar driver. Most of the time they're using the same driver, just in different alignments. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna draw a straight line, okay? Now this is our 0 line right here. When I say 0, that is our output level, 0 dB. So if we look at our sealed sub, it goes to about 50 hertz. We'll say this is 50 hertz right here, and begins to drop off. Now it drops off at 12 dB per octave, so it drops off kind of slow. Now with home theater, it's really important that from 20 hertz on up, we have a good response. We want a sub that has really good output to 20 hertz. Preferably doesn't drop off at all the way down to 20 hertz. Now, of course, with the sealed sub, we don't have that. Let's look at how far down it is at 20 hertz. So at 20 hertz, let's go ahead and say this is 20. Right here, we're down 7 dB. So let's say this sealed sub at 50 hertz, it was pushing or pulling 100 watts is what it took to get to a specific output level. Okay, 100 watts. Might have said hertz, 100 watts. That's the power. At 7 dB, every time we go 3 dB, we have to double power. So when we go to 3 dB louder, we're at 200 watts. We go to 6 dB, we're at 400 watts. So we're gonna say this is probably 500 watts roundabout. So we need 500 watts. If we were to boost this right here and get it as loud as it is at 50 hertz, we need 500 watts. Even though at 50 hertz, we only needed 100 watts, we're having to boost this sub. Now with subs in room, we actually need what's called a house curve. So in reality, we'd want this thing to be, you know, versus 50 hertz, 3 or 4 dB louder, you know, to sound natural in the room. So honestly, we're closer to probably 1,000 watts is what we're really gonna need right here. You know, once we get the room tuned and get it sounding good. Now, of course, this is not accounting for the room. It's not accounting for the peaks that we talked about earlier. And so you are gonna get some room help, especially if you put it in a corner. You know, you can expect, heck, you may get 6 dB of help, but it's still gonna be working much harder than it is over here at 50 hertz. Man, that Z looks really bad. But, so the bottom line is the sealed sub is working very, very hard. Now, of course, below 20 hertz, it's continuing on down. The cone is still protected by the cabinet, so it's fine to continue on down like it is. What really hurts it is if when you try to boost it below it. I mean, you can imagine how much power we needed here. Below that, we need even more power. Now, real quick about extension on subs. A lot of times manufacturers, you guys may not know, they play games with you guys. So what they'll do is they will claim usable output. Now, they can hear a mouse fart, and if they heard it, to them, oh, that's usable output. We're putting that in the specs. So you may have like a, you know, small 12-inch subwoofer driver, and they'll rate it usable output to 12, 13 hertz. It's complete baloney. So let's say you have two subs. One manufacturer says 12 hertz in room. Another one says 14 hertz in room. The price is the same. Maybe they're both 12s. You're gonna pick the one that says 12 hertz in room, unless there's something about the other one that looks better aesthetically, or you really like maybe, you know, but if everything is equal, you're gonna pick that one. But in reality, the other one may be a better performer, but we go by specs. It's human nature. The manufacturers know that. So anytime you see in-room response, that needs to throw up a red flag for you. Also, a lot of times you can find third-party actual measurements of the subs and see what they can really do. All right, so let's look at how the ported sub did it. So out here, let's say 100 hertz, this was 50, 100 hertz, we'll say is way over here. With the exact same driver, the ported sub now this ported sub is a full Marty, it's a large subwoofer, but it is designed for performance, okay? So it's a very large cabinet, but what happens is it begins to rise at 100 hertz very, very slowly, 50 hertz. 50 hertz, we're about 1 dB above the sealed alignment. You know, not a crazy amount, but we are louder. So at 30 hertz, we're about 3.5 dB louder than the sealed sub, which is substantial. It may not sound like much, but that means that we're using half the power, actually a little bit less than half the power of the sealed sub. Now again, this is with no EQ whatsoever. The manufacturers do boost or bake in filters like a sealed sub. Like if you have like an SVS and you select how many, or if you have a ported alignment, when you select how many ports are plugged, you know, it may be all of them where it's run in a sealed configuration. That's what it's doing. It's adjusting filters and boosting where needed. If you buy one that is already, you know, just like a sealed and that's it, it's built into it. But this is what's really happening behind the scenes with no boosting. Past 30 hertz, the ported does begin to drop. It drops faster. It drops at 24 dB per octave, basically twice as fast. Its drop off is twice as fast as the sealed. But at 20 hertz, that's about where it is at baseline. But it's back at the baseline at 20 hertz. So at 20 hertz, we're basically using the same amount of power that we were back at 100 hertz. You know, way out here, but you know, here at 50, it was lifting up. So it's actually using even less than 100 watts there. You know, but back here, we're using back to our 100 watts where this sealed sub was using 500 watts to get back up to that point. So we can easily see that the ported alignment is using much less power at 20 hertz, at 30 hertz, where the sealed sub is having to work its behind off. And this is why you see rooms with sealed subs, a lot of times they'll have stacks of sealed subs. It's because they're trying to overcome this, because when you add more subs, you get more headroom. They need those extra subs, those extra drivers to get that output, to get the dynamics they're looking for, to get the clean dynamics, the clean output. Or they could have done a ported and had that all along. Now remember, this is not in room. In room, all of these are going to go up because you've got room gain. So this sealed sub with room gain, you know what, maybe it sounds kind of, it looks kind of like that in room. It was brought up kind of more linear. Of course, in room, we do want a house curve, but the sealed sub, that's why it would sound tighter. That's why it would sound more musical, because it doesn't have the bloated bass. It's being brought up to a more linear response, where the ported sub, once we add room gain, you know, it's going way up here and it may have some peaks. The sealed sub is going to have the same peaks as well, just not as high up in the audible range. So that right there is why people will say that, oh, the sealed sub is more musical. Actually, it's not. Once you EQ these similar, your decay times are the same. The SPL, or the actual loudness of the different frequencies as you move along the frequency response, they're the same. They're going to sound pretty much the same. The only difference is the sealed is going to extend lower, unless you have something like JTR's got ported options tuned. I think down to 10 hertz. GSG's got some down to like 12 or 13 hertz. Those you're gonna get the best of both worlds. All right guys, hopefully all this makes sense. I mean, bottom line, no, ported subs are not slower or muddier than sealed subs once you set them up properly. You have to understand where you're measuring in your room when you do your room correction. You have to understand how each behaves in the room and what's going on. I mean, for me, if I'm gonna have a sealed sub, it's going to be one of the big boys. It's gonna be like the JTR or the GSG with a 24-inch from Stereo Integrity. I mean, I would love to have one of those, but that is a totally different beast. When it comes to smaller subs like 12s and 15s, I mean, I'm going with the ported because I want the headroom. I can get the tight sound because I understand what I'm looking for and how to EQ those peaks back down and get my decay back in check. By the way, we do have videos with Anthem and an older video with Marantz, kind of showing you where to place your mic. You can also check out episode 11 with room modes, and it explains to you what's going on in your room. And once you kind of see it visually, you'll understand why you have to be careful where you're measuring, because it can really screw it up when you're measuring places where you're not sitting. That's gonna be it for this one, guys. I hope this video helped y'all. If you have any questions, drop them down in the comments section below. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the notification bell, give this video a like, and I'll see y'all for the next one.